Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are and when you are listening to this. Either way, we are happy to have you here. Welcome to the Shredding for Gold podcast. I am your host, just in case you didn't know, Emily Trevanier, and I am the host of this podcast. So, very happy to have you all here and listening for episode 9 of the podcast. Holy crow, where does the time go, folks? I can't believe it. We are already at episode 9. This is crazy, but it's been so much fun. And so happy to have you all here and listening. First off, before we get started, if you would like to hear any other episodes on the podcast, or just to check out the podcast website, feel free to check out www.wyexcuse.com/shredding-for, that's FOR, -gold. And there you can find the podcast and a bit more about the podcast and all the episodes of the podcast that we have done thus far. And also just a huge shout out, because without them, we would not have this podcast. So a huge shout out to the entire group at Blueberry for giving the podcast a home and helping out with any sort of technical issues that arise. Thank you guys for doing what you are doing. You guys are doing amazing. So super thankful for you all. And also another huge shout out to my podcast producer, Maxwell Ivy, otherwise known as the Blind Blogger on the interwebs. Thank you for persevering and getting through technical issues to make sure the podcast is getting edited and up into the interwebs for you, the listeners, to listen. I know it's been super tricky, a little bit more tricky for you as of late because you have some technical issues and not having a working laptop right now, but I just want to say you are doing an amazing job and so happy and very lucky to have you as my podcast producer. So thank you, Maxwell Ivy, aka the Blind Blogger. Thank you. So yeah, here it is, episode 9 of the podcast. So today, you guys, for those who have listened to past episodes, and even the intro episode, you probably heard some jingling in the background and knew it was Darling, because we've said that if you hear some jingling or someone running around crazy in the background, that was Darling. But we never really did tell you a whole lot about Darling. So I thought I would take this episode to talk a bit more about Darling and let you guys learn a little bit more about Darling. She is a very special dog. She's just not a dog. She's actually my guide dog because I can't see. So Darling goes everywhere that I go. And so she has a very special job, and she plays a really special role in my life. So I thought I would take this episode to just give you a little bit more information on Darling and guide dogs in general. So that's what this episode is going to be focusing on. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. So Darling is a golden retriever crossed with a yellow lab. She is 5 years old now. She just turned 5 on November 14th. And I have had Darling now for about 3 years and a half. So, it's been a long time, but it just feels like yesterday that I received Darling. Darling is my second guide dog. My first guide dog, whose name is Olivia, she worked for almost 9 years. and now is 13 years old. She's going to be turning 14 in March, and she is happily retired and living with my mom, stepdad, and their dog and cat. So, but Olivia was my first guide dog, and Darling, who I have now, is my second guide dog. So Olivia was a purebred yellow lab, and she was about 60 pounds. Darling is, as I said before, a golden retriever crossed with yellow lab, and she's about 56 pounds. So both of these dogs came from a school in the States, actually. And the school is called Guide Dogs for the Blind. I'm going to make sure the link is up in the podcast description so that you guys can check out the school a bit more if you're interested in learning more about the guide dog school. But just in case you want to check it out, you want to pause the episode and check it out now, the link to look at is www.guidedogs.com, and that's just it will bring you to the school, like the website link for the school that both of my dogs have come from. And there's a lot of like really neat information on the website that you could look up, and also there's lots of stuff out on the interwebs that you can look up too. So I've compiled a few links that I'm going to add to the podcast description. So if anyone is interested in getting more information about guide dogs, feel free to check out those links. Or if you know someone who might be interested in getting a guide dog, feel free to share those links with them. So, but yeah, so there's guide dog schools all across the United States and Canada, and obviously there's guide dog schools overseas as well, but I'm not as familiar with those schools overseas. I just know, living in Canada, when I was doing my research, that there are a bunch of guide dog schools across Canada and the USA. And so, the oldest guide dog school in the States, and actually that's also the school that helped invent guide dogs, I guess you could say, or come up with training dogs to become guide dogs. That sounds a little bit better. So that oldest school in the States is actually in Rochester, New York, and it is called the Guide Dog Foundation. So that is the oldest school in all of Canada and the US. So that's pretty cool. So before I get into talking about Darling, I thought I would give you guys a little bit of history of the school. So basically, in 1946, after World War II, 5 community leaders founded a guide dog school in metropolitan New York to provide guide dog schools at no charge for individuals who were blind or visually impaired, including veterans who had returned from battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. The original school was located in Forest Hill, Queens. So the person who helped develop the training program was a man named William Hoseman. So he was a reputable dog trainer, and he was hired by the school to create a training program in the same year, so in 1946. And the first 2 guide dogs were successfully placed with 2 people. The one was named Vito Vero, and the other was named Arthur Torgerson. And so the guide dogs date right back to 1946. So that was like right after World War II. So I thought that was pretty cool. How that started off for both veterans and also for people who were blind and visually impaired. What else can I tell you here about the bit of the history? So in 2003, the Guide Dog Foundation for the Blind, so the one that's in Rochester, New York, recognized the need for assistant dog programs for veterans that would incorporate guide dogs, service dogs, and innovative training techniques. And so that same year, American Vet Dogs was created and incorporated to give veterans easy access to the best services possible to improve their lives. And then in 2008, the Guide Dog Foundation for the Blind became the first assistant dog school in the United States to be accredited by both the International Guide Dog Federation and Assistance Dog International. And basically those two international bodies, they certify guide and service dog schools all across the Canada and the United States. So the Guide Dog Foundation was the first school, was the oldest school that trains guide dogs. And I thought I had it here. Hold on one second. Thought I had it. Okay. And okay. Okay. I thought I had it. I had the number of guide dog schools in the United States and Canada, but it seems to have just bear with me for 1 second, folks. Okay. So in the United States alone, there are 12 guide dog schools, and all of these schools are considered charities. And then in Canada, there are, sorry guys, should have just written this down. It was open, but I don't know where it went. And in Canada, there are doesn't say. Well, I know there's a bunch in Canada. There's a bunch in Canada. So, actually, here we go. There is, I don't know. I just know there's a bunch. There's at least, I want to say at least 10 in Canada. And that's just guide dog schools alone. Though there's also, not only are there guide dogs, but there is also service dogs and therapy dogs. So for service dogs, there are many different types of service dogs out there, and the list of service dogs and like the different types of service dogs seems to be growing. But I know from doing research, the main major service dogs out there are dogs for autism, dogs for seizure response, hearing dogs. So those are dogs for people who are deaf. There are mobility dogs, so people who have a harder time getting around, or people who are in wheelchairs. There are dogs for diabetics, so those are obviously for people who have diabetics. The dogs can alert their handler when they are either low or high. And I actually follow a team, if you will, on Facebook who their child is diabetic, and so they got a diabetic dog for their child, and it has made a world of a difference for not only that child but also their family. So I will also, because they have a website, and actually they created a really cool movie recently, a little documentary with explaining the diabetic alert dogs and how it has helped not only their child but also the whole family and the community. So I will post that as well, because that's been really cool to follow along, and the video is free to watch and for anyone who is interested. So yeah, autism dogs, hearing dogs, mobility dogs, seizure response dogs, diabetic dogs. There's also dogs for people who have PTSD, and I think that more falls under therapy dogs, though, if I'm not mistaken. And then there are dogs that are therapy dogs that can go into hospitals and group homes to help the patients in those places feel a little bit better and give them some time, give them something to smile about. So that's a bit of the history of guide dogs and service dogs out there. Now I want to kind of talk a bit more about Darling and the type of training that both Darling and Olivia has went through. So again, there is a video out there that is also a documentary. It used to be on Netflix, but now it's just on Disney Plus. It is called Pick Up a Litter, and I will also leave that link up for anyone who is interested. And it sort of follows the dogs from puppies to all the way up to when they become guide dogs. And the cool thing about that video, Pick of the Litter, is that video was actually done at the school where both Darling and Olivia did all of their training to become guide dogs. So that's pretty cool. People ask me if any of her trainers or if she was in the videos, and unfortunately no, she wasn't in any of the videos, nor were any of her trainers, but there are super cute puppies in the videos. I've watched both of them, the one that's on Netflix and the one that's on Disney Plus, and the puppies are so cute, and the trainers are equally amazing. So, for those who don't know, guide dogs actually start their training at the very young age of 6 weeks. Crazy to think that they would start their training so young, but that's what happens. So at the age of 6 weeks, they are placed with what's called a puppy raiser family. And for the purpose of this, that is what the guide dog school where both Darling and Olivia call these families. Some schools have a bit of a different name for the people who raise them and have different protocols for raising their dogs. But I'm just going with what I know and what Darling and Olivia have done for their training. So, age of 6 weeks, puppies are placed with puppy raisers, and it's basically a family that is in charge of raising the dog. So the role of the puppy raiser is to obviously raise the dog, socialize the dog, so bring the dog to different environments and different situations, as many as they possibly can, and just so the dog can get used to being at different places and going to different places, and also being like just seeing how the dog will react to different like scenarios and experiences and how they will do, because it's super important that guide dogs are super socialized. Obviously, the puppy raisers don't know where the dogs will end up. So, for example, in Darling and Olivia's case, the puppy raisers wouldn't have known that both of them are going to Canada, where it gets really cold and really snowy in the winter months. So they wouldn't have known that because the guide dog school wouldn't have even known who the dog was going to be placed with. So, but the puppy raisers, they do their very best to socialize them in as many different situations and experiences as they possibly can. And also they try to give them different experiences so that they can see how the dog is going to react, and if the dog is going to be okay with those different experiences, or if it's not exactly going to work, or if the dog is too stressed out. It's super important because not all dogs will make it as guide dogs. In my experience and from what I've done in researching, only about 50% of the litter, if that, makes it as an actual guide dog. So that seems like a really high number of dogs that are not making it. But these dogs, they have to have certain personality traits and temperaments and be able to handle all of what is expected of them. And because being a guide dog, it's not an easy job. It is very stressful for them, but they absolutely love their job. Honestly, they absolutely love their job, and so it's super important that these dogs are in tip-top shape, and they are also being tested to make sure that they can handle the job that's before them. So because you don't want to have a dog who's going to be super stressed out guiding someone, because that's just not going to work very well. So so going back to what I was saying before, puppy raisers raise the dogs starting at 6 weeks of age, and they have the dogs for about a year and a half. Olivia was with her puppy raisers for about a year, and Darling was actually with her puppy raisers for about a year and a half. Just depends. I got Darling over 10 years ago now, so the training is, as they continue to grow, the training changes around a little bit. So they're with their puppy raisers, and then throughout when the puppy raisers are raising the dogs, they're followed super closely by the guide dog school, and they have to attend special meetings I think it's weekly or even like monthly, but I have a feeling it's actually weekly. And then they might get an evaluation monthly. And then, so the guide dog school is following the dogs super, super close and making sure things are going well. And if there's any like problems that arise, they can like work with the puppy raisers to problem solve or test the dogs and see if the job is going to be good for that dog, or if they need to consider another avenue for the dog. Because the cool thing is that if a dog doesn't make it as a guide dog at the school that I go to, they always, and I know a bunch of other schools do this as well, if a guide dog doesn't make it as a guide dog, there's always like other jobs that the dog could be doing. So they always try to like find different jobs first before career changing the dog. Especially if there's not like a whole lot, but they just know that it's going to be super too stressful for the dog. But obviously, if there's a behavioral concern or a major medical concern, they will career change the dog, and the dog will just become a regular dog and be fostered out to either back to their puppy raisers or to another family that's associated with the guide dog school. So at the age of about a year and a half, the dogs go to college, they call it, which I thought is really cute. So basically what happens when they go to college is the school recalls the dog, and so they go to what's called a guide dog school. And so for Darling and Olivia, they went to the Guide Dogs for the Blind school. So they have 2 campuses there in the United States. They have one in San Francisco, California, and Boring, Oregon. So both Darling and Olivia went to the San Francisco campus. And once they get back to the guide dog school, once they get recalled back to the guide dog school or go to college, they get to start their formal guide work training. So that's where they learn the various guide dog commands that the handler, that is like the person who they will be guiding, they call that the handler. That's where they will learn all the commands that we get to use with them. So and that takes approximately 12 weeks, if I remember correctly. They've been changing it around a little bit, so I think it's 12 weeks now. It's around that, or a little less than that, but it's roughly around that. So it's a 12-week program, and again, throughout that program, they get tested and evaluated to make sure to see how they're doing, and again, if they will also decide then if the dog will become a guide dog or if the dog is going to be doing a different career, or if it will be career change and become a regular dog and get fostered out with a family. So during that time, it's very exciting for both the puppy raisers and the guide dog school, because the puppy raisers they get progress reports every week to see how their guide dog is doing that they raise. So the school is really good about letting the puppy raisers know how things are going. And then once it's decided that the dog is going to become a guide dog, that's when the person who is blind gets to come to the school to train with the dog who is going to be their guide dog. So a neat thing is, when I got my first dog, so when I got Olivia, I was at the school for a month training with my guide dog. And when I got Darling, it was a 2-week program. So the difference between both of those programs is that with the month-long program, there was a lot more people who were blind who were training to be a guide dog, and more instructors. Whereas with the 2-week program, it's a smaller class, and there's less instructors, but it's a lot more one-on-one training. So I could customize the training to what I really needed. Not saying that I couldn't do that with the month-long training, but it was a little bit easier to customize it during the 2-week program because I had a lot more one-on-one training with my trainer. So that's pretty cool. And so another question that people often ask me is how long guide dogs work for. And there's no magical number for when they have to retire. There's more so criteria. So the big thing is if the dog is able to keep up with the handler's lifestyle and the handler is happy with how the dog is working, that's a big thing. Another big thing is if there's medical issues, medical things that come up that might compromise the dog and might not be good for the team to continue working together. So then if that is the case, the dog will be retired and the handler will have the option of keeping the dog or getting it, or the dog will be fostered out to either their puppy raisers first or someone else from the school. So there isn't really a magical number for when the dogs retire, at least not for the school where I got Darling and Olivia from. I know that some schools are a little bit more rigid with when dogs will retire, but for the school that I'm at, they don't have a magical number for when dogs retire. Some dogs will go for many years and will do very well with guiding, whereas others who guide might only last for a few years and then they might retire or get career change to a different career. So it really depends. And then another thing that a lot of people assume is that once you get your guide dog, you can just simply tell them, hey, Juno, bring me to such and such place. And they'll magically bring you to that place and you won't have to give them any instructions or anything. That is far from true. Although that would be super amazing, that is far, far, far from true. So in order to teach your dog where you want to go, you, the handler, need to know the route first and then teach your dog the route. And then the dog is pretty good about remembering the route. So when you're taking that route again, you might notice that your dog is starting to take a little bit of initiative and going the route that we were doing before. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, and then with the traffic lights as well, your dog isn't able to see the traffic lights. They follow the traffic patterns. And so there's a really cool thing that a lot of the guide dog schools have taught their dogs, and it's called intelligent disobedience. So that means if the guide dog sometimes if you give the guide dog a command and they see danger or it's not safe, the guide dog will actually ignore that command and stay still until the danger or until this whatever is going on is safe for you guys to proceed. So it's called intelligent disobedience, and it's super cool to see in action. But yeah, the guide dogs are super amazing. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, I know that was a lot of information, but I thought it would be super cool for you guys to learn a little bit more about guide dogs and a little bit more about the training that guide dogs go through, especially at the school where both Darling and Olivia came from. Feel free to reach out and ask. I would be happy to answer your questions, and I'm also going to I'm also going to include a bunch of links for you guys to look at if you are further interested in learning more about guide dogs, service dogs, and therapy dogs, or if you know someone who might be interested in learning more about guide dogs, service dogs, or therapy dogs. There'll be links there for you to check out or for you to share. So yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about for guide dogs. So yeah, darling, I guess the last thing I just want to say is, like, having a guide dog has honestly changed my life a lot. So when I got my guide dog, I was starting to lose a bit of confidence and not being as comfortable traveling around in my community because at the time I was starting to lose a little bit more vision, and my eye doctor team wasn't 100% sure if my vision was going to be stable or how much vision I was going to lose. So I was finding that just like losing confidence and independence. So I started looking into getting a guide dog, and I'm honestly so happy that I decided to apply for a guide dog, and I've been working with guide dogs for well over 10 years now, and it's honestly made a huge world of a difference. It's helped me become more confident again and more comfortable getting around in my environment. But it also is my family and friends, they see how much more confident and comfortable I am getting around in my environment, so it makes them comfortable and more comfortable and confident knowing that I have an extra layer of security with me, that being my guide dog. So yeah, honestly, it's been amazing, and I'm so glad that I did. It's definitely not for everyone, and at the very beginning it was definitely seemed like a whole bunch of work, but honestly I'm so glad that I decided to apply for a guide dog, and now that I've been working with guide dogs for quite a few years now. So, but yeah, if you are interested in getting a guide dog and you're not sure if it's right for you, obviously do your research or reach out to fellow guide dog users or service dog users and ask them questions about whatever you are curious about, or even just like reach out to the guide dog schools, and they're always willing to answer your questions or talk to you and help you figure out if having a guide dog is right for you. So I wanted to finish off by leaving you with a really neat song. It's the guide dog parody song. It's Trust You Baby. And actually it was created by one of the guide dog schools in the States. I learned about this song a few years ago, and it's really neat. It's a cute song, but I thought I would leave you guys with that. And after that, I'm going to sign out, and I will see you all next week. So thank you again for listening to the Shredding for Gold podcast. We'll be back next week with episode 10. And again, if you would like to learn more about the podcast, feel free to check out www.wyexcuse.com/shredding-for-gold. Or feel free to email me at trepanier@yahoo.ca. My name is Emily Trepanier, and I am happy to have you all listening. And please, 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 if you are listening to this podcast, leave us a review or a rating, and let us know how we are doing, because we'd love to hear how you guys are liking the podcast so far. What do you want us to change? What do you want us to add? We'd love to hear from you, and we will, for those who do leave us a review or a rating or whatever, we will give you a shout out on the podcast. And who knows, maybe we'll even give you a token of appreciation. That could be either related to Team Starfish, which is the team that I created for my snowboarding adventure, or for the Shredding for Gold podcast. So, you never know. So, leave us a review, leave us a rating, let us know. Alright? Alright, so before we sign off, here is the Guide Dog parody, Trust Me Baby. It's a really cute song. Alright guys, I am signing out, and I will see you all next week for episode 10 on the Shredding for Gold podcast.